Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana M.A. and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday.
So on today's episode, we are so excited to have Ryan Oakley with us. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So we are super excited to having this conversation with you. We're going to be talking about your artistic journey and process, how you balance art, business, all the things. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And real quick, before we dive in, let's go ahead and share a little bit more about your background for our listeners who may not be familiar with you or your work quite yet.
So Ryan was born in Los Angeles, California, and raised in North Carolina. She's a 2016 graduate of Wake Forest University with a BA in studio art and Spanish. She is an illustrator and comic book artist that creates traditional and digital work of art under her business, Heart Studio LLC. Her work brings bold new perspectives for fantasy, science fiction, and dystopian genres by focusing on women and BIPOC characters who have historically been underrepresented. Ryan has worked with Lifetime TV, Adobe, Dot Meredith, and more. She also has short comics published in the anthologies One Back Down, When I Was Young, and All You Can Eat. I met Ryan some time ago when first visiting the art supply store she manages, the Jerry's Art Supply Wholesale Club in Greensboro,
It's a
North
mouthful.
Carolina. It's a mouthful.
I love it. So many layers to your bio, which is always so fun. I'm excited to unpack those. But how would you describe the artwork that you make for someone who has never seen it before?
I would say one of my favorite artists describes his work as being naturalistic, and I think I would say the same for mine. And that artist is Adam Hughes. He's a comic book artist. Um, but I would say that's what I kind of strive for my art. It's not necessarily like realistic, but pulls from natural in nature and how humans look, but still has this illustrative flair. I mostly use watercolor as well, so it also has they tend to have this cool like effervescent feel to them, even though they are like these strong comic book characters and these
Yeah,
cool poses.
absolutely. Yeah, I love your use of color and bringing in that contrast and to really make these figures dynamic. It's really, really beautiful. Which with that illustrator and comic art style, what first piqued your interest about it, or how did you decide to go down that path? Obviously, as artists, there's so many aesthetics that any one of us can follow. And I feel like your vision is so distinct. So what really got you down that path?
So I initially thought I was gonna be an animator. I thought I wanted to be an animator. I'd always grown up with comics, not necessarily like the physical media, but like watching the different animated shows. And so I think that inspired me to want to be an animator. And as I got older, I realized that that wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do. And just like the whole process of animation is very it's a long one and it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if that was necessarily for me. And then it was around high school that I got back into comics. DC had restarted a lot of their major characters. It was called the New 52.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was cool to actually hold the comic book and read some of these characters like Batgirl. They were bringing her back, which is really cool. So I really attached to her. And then my neighbor at the time was a really good was really into comics. Had collected them all his life. Frank, love you, Frank. And saw that I had an interest, and saw that I love Teen Titans. He's big into DC, and was sharing and then gifting me books as well. Um, but it really wasn't until after I graduated and I realized I didn't want to do medical school. I had moved back home and was still doing art behind the scenes and stuff like that. But in undergrad, I had played around with mixing comics within my traditional art, and showed it to a comic professional that was promoting their book. They were traveling to different stores to push their book and their creator-owned book. And I showed them some of my work, and they asked me to do some fan art of the character Blink. And this book is called Bitterroot, and that creator is Sanford Green, and he was also there with the colorist Rico Renzi. And so I did, and they loved it, and they actually put it in the back of their third issue. They kind of curated this cool art gallery of different fan art inspired by the comic book. And so that kind of like got me into it and more interested in doing this as a career, and kind of tying something that I had a personal interest in with my own talents and the things that I was doing.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I'm like trying to put it into words that like maybe for people that aren't familiar with the comic book world, then you tell me if this metaphor kind of works. I'm thinking this would be the equivalent of you going to a concert for a band that you really love, and then you show them a sample of a song that you did, and they come back and say, actually, do you want to do a collab for a bonus track that we're gonna, throw on the extended version? I think this is the closest comparison I can
Yeah,
come with.
no, I
This
definitely
is so
agree.
cool.
Yeah. No, it really is. And it was really cool meeting both of them. Rico is the co-creator of Spider-Gwen. Like that's a big
Nice.
character now because of
Spider-Gwen.
Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah. So yeah, it was really cool. Very, very cool. And they were super nice. So that helped.
Big fangirl moment turned into like a real thing. That is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I love it when
Mhm.
creators like do open the doors like that, and instead of being like, here comes another fan, like, okay, yeah, cool, just buy my stuff, moving on. Next person,
Mhm.
they're like, oh, actually, that's really cool. Like, let's talk. Like, that is amazing. I love when that happens.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I want to dive a little bit deeper too into the work that you do that impressed
Mhm.
them as well.
Yeah.
Your work focuses on creating a more inclusive narrative by centering women and BIPOC individuals in genres like fantasy and sci-fi. As a fellow comic book and I'm more of a graphic novel kind of gal, to be
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
honest. I understand there's not that much representation except of certain very small pockets of folks. So how do
Mhm.
you approach these themes in your illustrations, and what do you hope to achieve by focusing on these groups?
Um, for me, I really tried to put characters that you wouldn't normally see in sci-fi, fantasy scenarios, just because I really grew up watching sci-fi and some westerns in the background because my dad, he's super into the sci-fi genre. But you never really saw people who looked like me as the
Mhm.
lead characters. And it wasn't until I got older that there was a little bit more of that. And I just remember my dad watching AVP, and then like really wanted me to watch it. And because Sanaa Lathan was the lead, and I didn't at the time, I didn't really like care too much because I was like, oh well, they're just gonna kill her off anyway. And once I like sat down and watched it myself, I was like, oh my gosh, like this this character is cool. She makes it to the end, and not only does she make it to the end of this sci-fi kind of horror movie, she is an honorary Cthulhu predator, whatever you want to call him, character. She gets treated like a warrior, and
Mhm.
that is something special to her character. And I thought it was really cool that that storyline happened to um a Black woman, and then also like watching behind the scenes of that film and just seeing how how she put her all into it, and the director just loved her take and approach on this character. So yeah, so I think having those moments really inspire me to create images similar to that. And then also pull from history, like history that we don't know a lot about. And that's why right now I'm kind of diving more into Westerns. That was another thing that was I watched, not I didn't really sit down and watch them, but that was like in the background just because like my dad was really into Westerns. And another genre where they don't really show a lot of people of color, and then what they do, it's in these stereotypical
Hmm.
ways and imagery. And so that's been something I've been trying to do and pull from history. A lot of people don't know the term cowboy comes from the black cowhands. It was actually a derogatory term that they only used for them. So,
Boy, yep,
right, exactly, yeah,
not man.
right, exactly. So, yeah, and it's because there isn't much of it. It's just the fact that I'm putting them and drawing them in these scenes is subversive enough, and that is awesome, but also sad,
Yeah.
the fact that I'm just drawing them is just enough to show that we don't see people who look like this in these different genres. So,
And we need to. We need to.
yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
so true. And I love how you touched on too, just obviously that element of intentional representation, of recognizing a void and then wanting to make art that fills it, but also that element of these influences from your childhood too, right? Like your dad
Mhm.
trying to get you to watch this movie and you're like, yeah, okay, dad, another movie. And then realizing later on, being like, hold on, like he was really doing something by showing me this, or really putting those puzzle pieces together after the fact of realizing it's very clear why your style is the way it is or why the content is the way it is. When you look back, everything's a straight line, so to speak, which I love. Which I'm
Mhm.
curious from an art making standpoint too. Um, I was also a fellow artist who was like, I want to animate for Pixar one day. This is gonna be great. And I got like my first 3D rendering class in college, and I was like, hold on, if I go down this path, I might be able to do it, but I'm also going to be in a windowless computer lab for like 13 hours a day. Like, is that really what I want when I'm making artwork? Let's go over here instead. That does not sound like fun. Like you go in, all the lights are
Mhm.
off. So I'm curious with the work that you make now, do you start with hand drawing? Do you transfer it to digital? Do you do a little bit of both? What does your process look like?
So I had a really great professor at Wake who introduced me to Photoshop my freshman year. That was in her fundamentals courses. So um I kind of took to using Photoshop pretty quickly, but we would do like what you were saying, we would do traditional hand drawing, scan them in, and then play around with compositing them. And so that allowed me to get comfortable with that software. But after I left undergrad, I felt like my skills traditionally were lacking. So I switched more to working traditionally and then also practicing more on anatomy. Um, but I will say, while I was doing that, I was also still honing up on my digital skills, and I really switched to using Photoshop to learn how to paint better. When I did painting in undergrad, that was a bit of a struggle because I felt like I was like, which you can do, but that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. But I felt like I was drawing with the paint more so than like actually applying the layers and values. And so it was a little bit of a disconnect because I had always been like drawer, graphite, all that, and then we're adding in value, which I understood, but then we're adding in color, which is
Hmm.
also a difficult topic, and I think everybody struggles with it. I don't think anybody really fully understands color. I think they just figure it out for themselves. and what works best for their work. Um, and so, yeah, I was doing a lot of portrait paintings using the Photoshop software, and that allowed me to experiment more with color, but without not necessarily without the risk, but it's just different doing it digitally. You know, you can go back and undo so
Do
much easier compared to with your oil paints. You know, you have to let things dry and then go and paint over it and rework things. And I think that also helped me understand color in painting as well. And that definitely has translated into my traditional work that I wanted to get better at. And I think that was more so a consequence of seeing some of my favorite comic book artists and how they handled their commissions. And a lot of times they were traditional, and that's how you kind of can give more value to your work when it's a one of a one original compared to doing a digital piece, which you can create an original, but it's more of a it's still going to be a print in the sense, and it's more so the original is based off of your integrity of not printing off more. You know, whereas if I
Yeah.
just make that
Yep,
one commission, that, you know, that's it. You know, I can try my best to make it look exactly the same, but it's not going to be. So
Yeah, and I
exactly.
imagine in a very dominantly digital medium, as you were saying, like watching movies or obviously comic books are printed, having that tactile, one of a kind drawing or painting can be that differentiator of, you know, that they're definitely not making just printing off more copies and saying they're one of one,
right.
which I'm
Yep,
sure is like a big
yep,
distinguisher in the industry.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Plus, if you do it in something like, we're not going to bash Procreate because Procreate is amazing, but let's say you have an artist, an illustrator that does it in Procreate. Even though Procreate can replicate a lot of cool stuff, a lot of textures, a lot of different media, it's definitely not going to have the same quality as if you drew that commission, doing watercolor, right?
Yep.
And
Hmm.
it's just going to be different on the paper and react differently. And then even if you did try to make a second one, it's not going to look the same, no matter what.
Yeah.
It can look very
And that
similar, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been like trying to work towards because comics is moving towards more digital. Um,
Makes
it,
sense.
yeah, because it's faster, and then you can also edit it as well, compared to edit it a lot faster compared to when you're working traditionally. It's a little bit more final, but there's ways around that that they you know, did in the past, but um I have been trying to figure out a way to replicate my process digitally, but I honestly haven't found anything that comes remotely close to it. I've found some like cool brushes that kind of mimic like a pencil or kind of like how I do my sketches, but it's yeah, there's nothing like it, and that makes me feel good too, especially with the rise of AI as well. That um yeah,
Can't be
there
replaced.
is anything out there that can, you know, help me make a digital watercolor like my traditional pieces. But yeah, I definitely want
Perfect.
to find some way of maybe meeting in the middle with the digital process, just because unfortunately, well, to me, unfortunately, that's where things are moving. And I just love the look of traditional um comic book art. You know, it just has something that the digital brushes just necessarily can't replicate.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I
yeah.
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, because then they're too perfect. I don't know.
Hmm.
There's just something about it. Ugh. But I do want to ask, especially, since you mentioned AI, of course, move to digital. But of course, there's other things too to consider here. What are some of the challenges you have encountered getting into the comic industry, and what strategies have helped you navigate these obstacles? Let's say besides the production part of it, of like digital versus,
Hmm.
versus traditional. Besides that, what other challenges have you encountered?
I'm sure some people aren't gonna like what I'm about to say, but it's definitely still a boys' club. Um, and so that has been a little bit difficult navigating that, and it is also like a heavy networking type of community. It's a small one, so everyone knows each other, and so it is difficult to break in. And then for me, I guess I've like had this pressure of getting like a cosign from one of the big two, to really like launch my career, because those things are meaningful, and that is how you get your name out there. But I have slowly transitioned from doing that, and I'm working on just making stuff for me and what I like, and not trying to pander to these big corporations that in the long run are only going to use me, and I won't have any credit or anything to whatever I would make for them anyways. Um, Not to say that I wouldn't want to work for them eventually, but right now I think it's more fun to work on things that I like, to get better, and to hone in on my skills. But yeah, it's yeah, that has been difficult for me, is navigating the networking and social aspect of it, because like I said, it is a smaller community. Um, but
Yeah.
I haven't let that get me down. I've met some great people who like see the value in my work, like Stephanie Williams. I always shout out Stephanie Williams because I remember finding her on Twitter. I was like, she is so hilarious. And then I found out that she was trying to break into comics, and so she was writing her own spoofs of different characters. And so I finally got to meet her a couple of years ago, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I know you." Like, and so that was really like, no, awesome. In our first meeting, she had just finished up a couple of issues of Nubia, and was telling me to do some fan art. She's like, "Do some fan art, no promises, but do something awesome, and I'll repost it and put on my story." And I did, and that Nubia piece became my like banner for a couple of years when I would go to like
Oh,
cons,
yes.
and she reposted it like she said she would. And so that I feel like that really like got my name out there. Even though I didn't work on the book, but like it had people thinking that I did because the piece was so awesome.
Yeah, that's the best. You're like
and
related tangentially.
right,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And and then from that kind of helped me grow a relationship with Stephanie, and so I would see her at different cons, and shout out to Triad, excuse me, Eastgate Comic Con. That's where I met her, and they were so kind enough to invite me to table there. Um,
Nice. Nice.
and yeah, and so yeah, so every time I would see her at that con, she'd be like, "Yeah, I've been putting your name over this. Did they reach out to you?" I'm like, "No." And
Oh,
Yep,
and these would be
yep.
like some big names that she was like putting my name out there, which is like really, really awesome. And she still does that to this day. So I always like shout out Stephanie, because she definitely is a great supporter, and tries to push great talent that isn't necessarily getting the recognition that it probably should be getting. And from her,
Emerging
I've
talent.
exactly, and from her, I've found other artists. Um, and another one of those people is TJ Sterling. He's like super awesome, always trying to get my name out there, and always checking in on me, trying to see, what are you working on? He's also a
Nice.
teacher, so yeah,
Community
always
over
give.
competition, baby. There it
Yeah,
is. There
yeah.
it
exactly,
is.
exactly, exactly. And so yeah, I've been lucky enough to meet both of them, and then also the wonderful, amazing people who do put on Heroes Con, Seth and Carla. They really helped me um my so I'd always wanted to table at Heroes, but then COVID happened.
Mm,
Um and so as soon as I got a chance to apply, once they were opening things back up, I did. And they have this section called Indie Island, and it's curated, and it's for
Yeah.
like emerging independent artists. And so I tabled, and they were like, yeah, they were like, yeah, they responded and said, yeah, we would love to have you. So I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm gonna table. And then I got my table assignment, and I was like, Mom, they put me in Indie Island. I was like so shocked. And I was like, I'm a nobody. I mean, I know I did the fan art for Bitterroot and all that, but and then yeah, so I met Seth, and he was just telling me, they really do try and pay attention who's submitting, and my
mhm.
artwork, you really stuck out to them.
Nice.
And so they wanted to honor that, and that made me feel really good that there are some people out there that are really focusing on merit and not necessarily on who
Yeah.
in all the accolades.
Yeah, it sounds like that was like kind of that perfect pairing of both though, right? Like it
Hmm.
wasn't okay, just name dropping left and right in order to get your foot in the door. It's kind of that double process that sounds like you've been able to navigate pretty organically of obviously having an online presence, sharing your
Hmm.
work online, but also attending these in-person events, having tables, which I feel like there's equivalents to other form of arts too, whether it's art
Hmm.
markets or group shows, but going to those conventions and also talking and supporting the other artists there, doing that
Yeah.
in-person networking that can translate into maybe a larger name in the industry resharing your work, which inevitably catapults you up. It's all that sharing it forward element. And of course, the pleasant persistence of applying multiple times, reaching out to people multiple times, so where they say, okay, this woman is sticking around. Her work is really good, and we want to reward her because it's not just oh, I applied once, I didn't get in, and now like I'm not doing it ever again. Right? Like
Right.
they recognize even if you get told no previously, I feel like people going through these applications is like, I've seen this name more and more. Like, okay, let's go ahead and give them the opportunity, which is wonderful. And
Yeah.
it kind of makes me curious though, because as we mentioned earlier when reading your bio, you've worked with very notable brands like Lifetime, Adobe, Dotdash, Meredith. So I'm curious, how did you first, I guess, get connected with those
Mhm.
organizations and how did you develop those professional relationships?
Yeah. So, so like I kind of mentioned before, I was like doing portrait art, but then also diving into comics around the same
Mhm.
time. So, that was around 2019, I believe, that Bittery was coming out, but I still felt like I was like weaker with my skills. But there were all these different artist databases that you could add your contact information and then like what you did. And one of those was Drawing While Black, and
Mhm.
it was out of a response to a lot of the 2020 riots and then police brutality. And Lifetime TV actually found me from that database. So I always like tell people to, well, it's not something that happens as often now, but I always tell people if there's something like that where you can just sign up and submit your portfolio where it's low cost to you, where you don't have to create a piece, for something where you may or may not get paid for it, do it. And so
Mhm.
that was the case for signing up for these different databases. And so Lifetime TV, the producer who was working with their social media um, department, really did their job of searching and looking for artists. A lot of times,
Mhm.
they some of these corporations and companies say, well, where are they? But they aren't doing their part to actually find them. And so that was, yeah, we're here, but you're not looking.
Never.
Right.
And so I thought that was really awesome that, they did their part in search. And I remember getting the email through my Wix website and I was like, this is fake. So
This is definitely a scam.
yeah. And so I searched up the producer and I was like, oh, this person's real. Like, wait a minute.
I am not
And
sending you money. I'm not sending you a money order.
right.
This is real.
Just in case.
And so after that, I immediately responded and I was like, yes, I would love to work on this project. And the project was Fierce Female Fridays. And they were,
Nice.
yeah. And
Right
they
up your
were
alley.
right. And they were looking to commission. I mean, I can't remember. Well, I don't know if it was for the full year, but each month they were going to commission an artist of color to do a portrait a week. And they loved the work I had done. So I guess I got to back up a little bit. So I was really into creating like non or bipartisan vote work, and that also helped me. So Amplify Art and Women's March put on this open call for artwork to get people out to vote, no matter your political affiliation. And so I made a piece that was just talking about fight for your rights, and it won out of like thousands of submissions. Like Shepard Fairey was on the curatorial team, and some awesome other people. I think Jasmine Crockett was on it too. Um, Hopefully
So
I'm not
cool.
mixing up with someone else. But so that got selected. And so from there I was getting commissioned to do more pieces by for California Endowment of the Arts for their census. And so Lifetime TV saw those pieces and they liked that style. But wasn't really doing that at that time anymore, and I had grown a little bit. And so I came up with like a sample for them and they liked that. And um so then I was selected to do four pieces. um, One of them was supposed to only be one woman, and then they edited to be five, and it was I was supposed to depict mothers who had lost family members or their children to police shootings, and that one was kind of heavy to do, but
I bet.
yeah. But I was very glad to have been asked to do that one. And yeah, that project was really, really awesome, and um helped propel me into getting the work that I did for Adobe. So
Hmm.
um so that was another one of those where it was I didn't have to do work. I just submitted my portfolio and
Perfect.
applied and answered whatever statement questions that they had on there.
Mhm.
And um, I had a friend who was applying to do it as well, and I was like, "Well, I'll just do it." I didn't think I was going to get selected.
Right. Let me just
Uh,
like throw this coin into the water.
yeah,
Hope for the best. We'll see.
exactly, exactly. And I don't know if it was a month or a couple months later, and then I was like, I got the email that I was selected. I was like, "Oh my
You're like,
God."
again, this is
That's so
spam. It's
cool.
spam.
I was like, oh, they want me to do things, and now I got to shake off this imposter syndrome. And with that project, that one, I really did struggle with a lot of imposter syndrome. It took me a lot longer to come up with an idea and do my project than I would have liked. But luckily, the advisor who I had was super understanding and helpful. And so that one was like they called them creative residencies. And so it was more of like a remote residency, which was really cool because we had meetings that we would sit on in and talk about our projects and everything and get advice and
Yeah.
commentary, which was really cool. And so for that one, they were launching Adobe Fresco, which is
I
pretty
know
cool.
Fresco.
Yeah, I'll say
Yes.
Adriana's a big Fresca fan. I just started
Big
using it,
Fresca
so
fan.
very new.
Yay. So they selected a couple artists to create, I think it was like maybe three of us, um, who were for the Adobe Fresco team, and then they had some photographers who were using, I can't remember what program, but it was like a light version of Lightroom, possibly. But what's cool was that I got to work on Adobe Fresco because so 2019, I attended Heroes before applying to Table, just to get, see how it was. And I actually got to meet Kyle Webster. He probably doesn't remember me, but he was just walking through the aisles, and he's pretty big in comics because of his brushes. A lot of people use those. And we were chatting, and I was just saying, well, I love her brushes and all that stuff. And he was just talking about how he was working on a new project for Adobe, a software, and it was Adobe Fresco, and working on doing brushes for that. So I thought that was really cool that I had like spoken to him about it, and now I'm gonna be one of the artists to help push it and create a tutorial
Yes.
using it. Yeah.
That is
So,
so cool. Full
right.
circle moment.
All networking.
Really.
All comes back to that networking, baby.
Hmm.
It's
Mhm.
so
Yes.
true.
Not
It's
being
so
afraid to
true.
say, hey, I am shaking in my boots, but I love your work, so hey, let's talk.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
So
also
that.
love how when you were sharing all those different experiences, it almost feels like one kind of led to another in some way, shape, or form. Whether it was the confidence to take a shot in the dark and just apply for
Hmm.
one of the open calls that feels like you have no chance, and then it actually happens, which helps with the confidence, but also just your portfolio from one
Hmm.
campaign you get to use to then apply for the next campaign. And that's kind of how that momentum starts. And which you kind of alluded to,
Yeah.
being on listservs or applying to
Hmm.
calls, but what advice would you give to other artists who are looking to work with some of these major companies?
Mm. Um, you know, create work that you want to create, and that's some of the advice that a lot of my favorite artists who've gotten really big work, like Jim Bartell. I definitely listened to some of the advice that she would put on Twitter. And one of the things was because she used to do coloring books, and I think one of those coloring books was like Sailor Moon and
Yeah.
her style. And and she always stressed like draw the things that you want to draw, even if it is fan art, and that's how you get better at it. And you never know what will come out of it. And
Mhm.
people will see your work, and you'll gain a lot of attraction doing that. But then it's also not like you won't feel like you're losing out because you're doing something that you like to do, compared to doing an open call where they require you to create a piece about something that you may or may not feel connected to, or it's not necessarily something that you incorporate into your art to the day-to-day basis. And like with the coloring books, that's something that you could go around and sell locally. It's not necessarily something that has to be big online, especially with like the increase of different art markets and zine fests. You can make a cool little small coloring book. Those are things that I did too, was made zines in the meantime while I was still trying to figure out my art direction for comics. And getting comfortable with different mediums. But you've got to experiment and play around with different things for sure. I think that would be my advice. And don't feel like you've got to do a certain thing to make it, or that one person's path is the way to make it as
Mhm.
well. Like
Mhm.
you're on your path, and the least it looks like there's a path in front of you, the better, because that means you're creating your own.
Yeah,
So
trailblazing left and right. Yeah, and I love that
yeah.
advice because it actually ties into something you started to say earlier on an earlier question about like if you were trying to cater to the big corporations, you're probably going to end up in a bucket of sameness, if we can put it that way. I'm
Hmm.
thinking of the big two right now, and I'm like, yeah, there's plenty of characters in those universes that are just fillers almost. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of amazing ones, of course, but
Right.
we all know there's a few that are like the equivalent of extras in a movie that nobody remembers. And it's like, why would you aim towards that when instead you could aim to make your own unique, original art that you are ridiculously passionate about and then
Mhm.
get noticed for that? And then they'll ask you to
Mhm.
make more of what you already love, not you trying to cater to a mold that was created by somebody else that
Right.
could have been
Because they
easily.
don't know what the next big thing is until you show them.
And they're
So
always looking too.
yes, they
They're
are.
always
Yeah.
looking. But
Yeah.
if they
So and
go, oh, you
mhm.
created, I don't know, okay, all right. I'm gonna keep the nerd level as slow as I can. But you created I'm trying to think of things that people know. The next Wolverine equivalent. Let's go with that. I think most people listening probably have heard of Wolverine, right? It's
Mhm.
like you're trying to create the next Wolverine equivalent. They're gonna be like, been there, done that. We've seen the claws come out. I mean, there's, the female version too, which is also badass. But anyways,
Yeah.
they're we've seen it already. Like, couldn't the, adamantium come out of, I don't know, the head and its horns instead? Like, can we like switch things up a little, but don't make it a minotaur because that thing's been around for thousands of years. So can we like,
Right.
remix it a little bit different? But no, I love that advice and I think it's true. I like that idea of kind of like what you just said. It's okay to step back a little bit if needed, or for different phases and cycles in your creativity, different stages, to then refocus on what are you doing and what are you actually passionate about, and then deep diving into developing that. And then
Hmm.
from there springs forth what comes next. So thank you for bringing that up. I really, really love that. Now, of course, doing art is just part of it. You're also a creative business owner. You are
Yeah.
a retail manager. What? At an art store. How do you balance the demands of like, you need time to create your art. You have your retail job responsibilities. You also attend conventions, you post things online. Like, you have commissions possibly that you also have to deal with. How do you balance all that? How do you stay sane?
Um, if I'm gonna be honest, I don't. Um, it's
No judgment, no judgment.
yeah, yeah. Honestly, it's something that I want to get better at is I realize I know a lot of artists can be like hard on themselves and think that they're lazy and especially with procrastination, but it's really just um a schedule issue and then setting time. So I'm working on setting, okay, I'm going to draw from this time to this time and nothing else. Um and that has been helping me a lot. And also helping me get faster as well with completing my work, but still having a good high quality. The managing the retail space was really something I kind of fell into that wasn't really something that I had aspirations for, and it's it's had its pros and cons. I love being able to interact with different artists within the community, and also be able to like create my own events at the store as well. So I've
Networking.
created, yeah, exactly, exactly, and create a vending event for just to give back to the community, but then also like um get people to come into the store as well. So it has like um double the value for sure. And but yeah, it's really hard, just because this the store is treated like it's mine, and so a lot of times I do fall my own personal work falls to the wayside, supporting others and all that, but I think it's a good thing, and it's purposeful, and I'm always about giving back and sharing, and so there is a little bit of mentoring that goes on within the store with some of the my associates who are into art or into comics, so that um helps. It's kind of like balances it out for me, and then it
Yeah.
also inspires me to like, okay, yeah, I gotta get back and start working on stuff
Yeah.
and get a little bit more focused. But yeah, I love where I'm at with the retail and managing and being a general manager. It has helped me with my own business and implement certain things. So I'm even though it's not necessarily something that I had aspired to do, I definitely am learning and taking from it from my own business.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
as you
Heart
should.
Studio just kind of grew out of me getting these different projects. Like I was saying, I was doing bipartisan art and getting these monetary awards, and it's like, okay, well, maybe I can make a business out of this because, growing up, you don't really, especially with us millennials, they, oh my gosh, really push STEM. Which I was a STEM kid. I was really good. I think I mentioned I was like pre-med for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I loved biology, was really good at math, was really good at chemistry, like really excelled at those. But I'd always loved art. But you know, you're always told that, well, you can't make a living on art and all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. And as I got older, I felt like, just imagine if all my favorite artists had listened to that, we wouldn't have had their amazing artwork, like just imagine the Denzels and the Viola Davises. If they had listened to that, we wouldn't had all this amazing art to consume. And I love that that was like highlighted during COVID because we couldn't go out and interact with people, but we could interact visually through movies, films, books, graphic
Music.
novels, yeah, music. And so that put a big highlight on art, which I love, and I hope that we continue to do that and also be reminded of that as well with this
Mm-hmm.
increase of AI. But um, yeah, the social media thing though, posting that is that has been a difficult thing to navigate. But I am learning and taking from different artists what they're doing and trying to create a schedule and even though if I do take breaks, try and record. That's what I'm working on, trying to record everything, take photos, process photos, so that when I
Document,
am ready to,
document.
yep, so that when I'm ready, I can spread that information out over a couple of months and not, just dump everything on one day. You can really break up that, break up those
Schedule it a little
videos.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stretch it
Yeah, I
out.
love that you brought up. Yeah, I love that you brought up time blocks. I think that's so important, especially for artists that are like waiting for inspiration to arrive. And it's like if you do that, it might be years. So instead, maybe just do 10 minutes a day, even if it's just a doodle. It'll
Yes.
come to you afterwards, and maybe those 10 minutes turn into 3 hours. Like you never know.
Mhm.
But like giving that a chance. But I love that balancing by at least making sure that your creative time is like reserved, like it's sacred enough to get its own little time block in the calendar,
Yeah.
even if it's not all the time or as much as you'd like. But I love that. Now, there's
Yeah.
something you touched upon regarding working in retail and taking some of that and applying it towards your art business, which I think is so smart. When we talk to artists in interviews or individually, something that comes up a lot is, oh, but my background isn't fill in the blank. Like, I don't know how that relates to art. And it's like, no, you can usually take something, no matter from what industry, and kind of like morph it in. Something I've heard you discuss in interviews before is that you had to learn entrepreneurship through trial and error. And I feel like that's, of course, for a lot of people, that's the case. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned, through that process? One or two hot
Mhm.
tips that you're like, "Mhm." Write this down,
Yeah.
kids.
Uh, um, for me, I think a lot of advice that I give to people, is with the everybody thinks they need to like immediately start an LLC, but then they don't have any income coming in or
Mhm.
consistent income coming in, and they don't realize there's maintenance fees
Uh-huh.
involved with it, with having that. And it can get expensive. And you don't even necessarily need to have it. And just understanding what a limited liability is too. Think about, okay, is what I'm doing going to create some sort of liability for me? And if not necessarily, you don't necessarily need to create that until you start bringing in a lot of income. And then before that, just separate out what you're making, separate it from your personal bank account, and that can help you a lot. That's something I had to learn. I initially knew to separate out the bank accounts, but I didn't necessarily need to start an LLC as soon as I had because it's a little bit stressful, and if
Not
you
cheap.
don't know a lot about business, it can be. And I'm still learning as I go, because that's not something that a lot of artists talk about, is the money side of things and what they do, and like even just like taxes. How are you going to file your taxes and all that?
Yeah.
Um,
Or oftentimes if it is talked about, it's in very like abstract terms. And it's like, make sure you file your taxes and figure out your business plan. And you're like, okay, but logistically, like, what does that mean? Like,
yeah,
what do I need to type in online to figure out what I need?
right.
Yep.
And you're like,
Yes.
everyone says a lot about it, but they don't actually say anything about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, which realistically,
Uh,
maybe because they don't really know it. And
yeah.
everyone is also so different. Every business is different. To your point of one artist, if they're teaching kids constantly or hiring other artists to work on projects with them, there's liability in that. But other people,
hmm
it's you can have a full-on business and never be an LLC because there's no situation in which you have that liability.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
hmm
in the beginning,
Yeah.
that's a great point of yours like, well, I'm just told I'm supposed to do this, so let me do it. And you realize it was an
It could have
unneeded
waited.
expense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As far as like my next point would be for like tabling specifically to people who want to get into vendor markets. Uh Figuring out your table, that was a lot of trial and error, and like not being so cluttered. I realized like if you give people too many options, they won't buy anything at all.
You mean
Um
like convention setup? Point of
yes,
clarification for this.
yes,
Okay.
excuse me,
All right, cool.
yes.
Cool, cool.
Convention, or
You're
even
good.
at like
Art
local,
fairs.
yeah, art fairs, vendor markets.
Yeah.
Um yeah, that was definitely trial and error. I think for me, um a lot of people and a lot of younger people, which I've realized, and it may be a consequence of COVID and getting into the workforce remotely and all that, but I think a lot of millennials learned from copying.
Mhm.
And so do that. What are the professionals in the field that you want to get into doing? Not necessarily artistically, but how are they presenting their artwork? And that is something that helped me kind of tailor down my table so that it's not overwhelming for me and setting up, and not overwhelming for a customer. That's something that I also pull from the store, and as well as like merchandising and trying to present things in a way that makes it easier for someone to shop. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, look,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's
Yeah.
so important because I think that's often under discussed of just the setup. And as a shop owner, of course, that is the psychology of commerce is so much of it, where it's okay, people are not buying your art prints, not because it has anything to do with the quality of your work. It's simply because if you have a market booth where it is in the flow of how people are, no one's seeing this container of prints because it's in the back corner. If you put it in the front where there's room for them to stand and
Mhm.
look, then they'll start selling. And I think oftentimes as artists, we can say, oh, well, it's just because my work's not good. I need to work harder, which like is always true. We'd always need to be
Mhm.
improving, but it's also just because the layout of the booth doesn't make sense. Or to your point, yeah, there's 100 different designs when actually they would sell better if you only showed 20
Yep.
because people
hmm
get overanalysis paralysis is a very
Oh
real
yeah,
thing.
they
Like, well, I'll
definitely
just
will.
decide later and come back, and then you never see them again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And put prices. That'll be my third one. Don't
Mm,
be afraid. Just put your prices up there. If
yeah.
somebody wants to buy it and it is in their budget, and even if it's not, they will make it work if they want it. Like,
Yep.
put your price up that you want. And there's always room to negotiate too if I always like doing that. Especially if I can see someone, really likes a piece. Like I rather be in a home, it being hung up and it being
Mhm.
enjoyed by someone else, than it sitting at my table, just because I didn't want to drop it a couple of dollars, or
Right.
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but
And then they also get that exciting experience of like maybe they're stressing about the price. You say, you know what, like I can see you have a connection with it. How about we do like 15% off? And like that's what
right.
they need, which is like obviously then they love it even more and they have that
Yeah.
connection with you. Just
Oh yeah.
amazing. Now,
Yeah.
real quick, looking ahead, obviously this is all based on your previous experiences, but looking ahead, what are some upcoming projects or new themes in your work that you're excited for?
So I'm getting diving more into the Western theme, but mixing it with sci-fi.
Mm.
So that's something I'm working on right now for like a personal project. It's been really fun because I'm also diving into the history of different people of color and their representation in the West and in Western spaces and trying to put them at the forefront. And right now those are just gonna mostly be like pinups or illustrations, but I definitely want to write a story of some sort or expand upon some of these drawings that I'm doing. And I'm really excited because I've always wanted to do like a Western. Just watching my dad watch them and just him telling me he grew up watching The Lone Ranger and always wanted to stay up and try and watch that, but his dad, not letting him. But so make something that that would be cool and like what he could see himself in, and then also myself. And so yeah, that's what I'm moving forward in, and yeah, I'm just like taking it day by day, and if someone has a project they want to present to me, that'll be great. Um,
Open to new
Always
opportunities.
open. I love
yeah,
that.
yes,
Yes.
always open and finishing up some commissions as well that I'll be posting soon. And then I even want to get into horror as well.
Hmm.
Especially with like the Deliverance that's come out. It's got a cool mixed cast in it, and it was cool to see like Monique in a horror film. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
who would have thought? I
Random,
never would have
yes.
thought of that. Yeah.
Like Ryan.
uh,
From
right.
TV sitcom to horror. What just
Yeah.
happened?
So it's cool. It's cool. So that's what I'm working on.
And
I
there's
love
And
cons for
it.
that too, conventions
yeah.
for that, which is
Hmm.
awesome. So your tabling skills translate. I mean, that's awesome.
Yes.
I
Yes,
Yes.
love it.
do it. Do it.
Now,
Wait,
Ryan,
hold on. Zombie cowboy situation. I see it already.
Oh my gosh. Actually,
write
yes.
it
Really?
down.
Yeah.
Yes. No,
Female
really, no.
alien cowgirl zombie. There it is. Just throw it all in. See what
Yes.
happens.
I love
Yes.
it. I'm excited to see it.
Thank you.
Now, real quick, we do love to
Mhm.
ask our guests how they define success, but first, we're going to take a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist courses.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there. So, what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold, so you don't have to waste your time going down those endless rabbit holes.
In addition to weekly calls, we have created video course modules to cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, artist mindset, PDF resources, templates, and so much more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartists.com to learn more, get immediate access, and level up your career today.
Welcome back, everybody. So a question we love to ask every guest is, how do you define success as an artist?
Alrighty. So I guess for me, I think it's just been like all of the little projects that I've been able to do have been great for me. It's not necessarily about how big they get or how many people know my name, but it's getting to work with these people that I've followed for a while. And one of those people was Stephanie Williams. To me, that was like, success in itself. We got to do a 5-pager together in the when I was young anthology. And yeah, just being able to do what you love, and create the things that you want to create. And I've been able to do that. And it may not look, some people think success is like a monetary thing, but really just following your dreams and doing what you want to do, and like betting on yourself and investing in yourself is to me is what success looks like, because you never know what can come out of that. And like it's crazy. Like I didn't know what I was going to do after saying I didn't want to go to medical school anymore, but like I've been able to do all these like cool things, and it's just like crazy how it's kind of happened fast too, once you kind of uh let go of things that you are not necessarily doing for yourself, and then start focusing on the things that you want for yourself. It kind of falls into place um a little bit faster. So yeah, I think that's what,
Awesome.
yeah, success would be for me.
I love that. Now, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey?
Hmm. Um, for me, I tell everybody this, all the young people who are in college, just do it. Do the art major. Don't worry about whether or not you're gonna make money. I think for me, I personally felt like I was had a late start. But as you can see, it doesn't matter, wherever you start. But like, if you feel like this is something you want to do, just do it. No matter the doubters or whatever people are saying, like, do it. It'll benefit you in the long run, for sure. So yeah,
You
that's
gave
like
it,
what I always tell young artists. If this is something you're interested in, like, do it and give your 100% into
yeah,
it.
give it your all. Be obsessed
Mhm.
if you need to.
Yes.
Be your biggest fan. I love that. I
Exactly.
love that so
Hmm.
much. If someone randomly hands you $100, what would you splurge on or invest in? It has to be something that brings you joy and relates to your art or business.
Ooh, okay. I think I think I would like, I don't have like a specific piece of art, but like I think I would invest in a lot, because there's a lot of like lost media going on. So I think I would like take that $100 and like go around and try and find like DVDs of films that I've always loved that have inspired me. And so that I could have a hard copy, because there's a lot of things that you can't even find on streaming services. And the thought of lost media actually kind of like scares me. I don't know why, but it's like such a interesting um concept and idea, especially with like streaming, how it grew so fast, and all that. So yeah, I think I would like try and find as many of my favorite like films and stuff when I was younger that I just can't find now, like Sailor Moon. Oh my gosh, yeah. Like that I would love that as
Yeah.
like a comfort film or background for while I'm doing work. I guess it's
Yeah,
slightly related,
yeah.
You could go on
I
a
think that one
total
has
deep
a big
dive.
enough fan base that there's copies all over the
Yeah.
world. I think you're okay with.
Yeah.
But no, I like that idea. I hadn't heard it put that way. Lost media. If you had something that
Mhm.
was created just for streaming or during streaming, and there was never a physical version of it made for purchase, let's just say, then whenever the decision makers, so to speak, decide to retire it and it goes into some digital vault, it could never come back
Yeah.
out. So you can
Yeah.
never reconsume it, if that's
Yeah.
the word, or
Or there's
revisit
so
it.
many DVDs or VHS. I talk to my friends about this all the time, and I'm like, who,
Yeah.
like the decision makers, they literally are making culture or like manipulating culture by here's the new videos for the month or like new
Mhm.
releases from these like 90s, 80s movies of, okay, they're like, I mean, is that gatekeeping of media to where you're like, I want to have a
Yeah.
VHS version of this so I can
Mhm.
watch it anytime I want. Just like I
Exactly.
used to be able to as a kid, like go to the
Yeah.
shelf and you could go to Blockbuster and rent out any DVD
Mhm.
you wanted.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Man, I
Yeah.
love that
VHS,
answer. We
DVDs,
definitely have not
and
gotten that
Blu-rays and
one
boxes.
before. We have
Yeah.
not gotten that answer before, so definitely a unique one, which I love.
Yeah. We have like laser discs. My dad, like laser discs came
Yes.
out, yeah, right before
I
DVDs and stuff
remember
like that
that.
in the 80s. So we've got
Yeah.
like Aliens, The Crow, he's got that. Like he's such a
Yes.
little
Whoa.
sci-fi nerd. Yeah, like I was like shocked he had that. I was like, why did you get that? But also like he was big into martial arts and stuff.
Mm.
Makes
And
sense.
did
That makes a
judo and
lot of
jiu-jitsu.
sense.
Yeah, so Brandon Lee, who was the son
Of course.
of
Bruce
yeah,
Lee.
yeah. Bruce Lee, he
Two legends.
was in that. Right, exactly. So
I love
yeah.
it.
That is
Man, well,
hilarious.
Ryan, this has been so much fun. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on the podcast today. Real quick
Th-
before you go, how can
mhm.
listeners stay in contact with you after they listen to this episode?
Yeah, just follow me on Instagram at Ryan Oakley Art. That is the best place to stay in contact with me. I'm always there and trying to make some new work to post soon. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll sure to
Yeah.
link that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
In the meantime, for our listeners, if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at @AmayArt across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio across all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artist on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.